A reminder of our main story on this Al Jazeera News Hour. Russian missile strikes have hit a military training base in western Ukraine. The governor of Lviv says 35 people have been killed and more than 130 injured. The base is just 20 kilometers from the Polish border. There's been intense fighting outside the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, where air raid sirens have been heard. Many people have been fleeing the Russian advance to government-held towns. And Ukraine's president says a convoy carrying humanitarian aid is on its way to Mariupol. The southern port city is surrounded by Russian forces and no one is allowed in or out. Well, more now on that attack on that military base near the border with Poland. Let's speak to Kurt Volker about this. He's in Washington, D.C. and is a former U.S. ambassador to NATO and a former U.S. special representative for Ukraine negotiations. Thank you very much for speaking to us. What does this tell you, this attack on this military base close to Poland, a NATO ally, a member of NATO, rather? What does it tell you about President Putin's strategy and how worried should we be about this strike coming so close to NATO territory?
Right. Thank you very much. I think it is very interesting. Putin is clearly getting a bit more reckless and a bit more desperate. Things have not gone well in this war for the Russian forces. And you can see many signs of this. You can see him thinking of bringing in Syrian fighters to fight alongside the Russians. He's arrested a few generals in the military leadership, placed them under house arrest, same with some of the leaders of the intelligence services. He is increasingly striking civilian targets since he's not able to break the Ukrainian military. Striking this base very close to Poland, he knows it was risky. If the shots had gone just 20 kilometers further, it could have hit Poland. And this is also striking an area where Western forces have donated supplies to the Ukrainians, and so they're actually going after some of these supplies. It's reflecting, I think, a very dangerous but a very desperate state of mind.
A dangerous situation, you say, and it's not known yet whether any foreign personnel were on the base. It's certainly a clear message from Russia to NATO and its allies. How should they respond, do you think?
Well, I think we need to be issuing Russia some very severe warnings that we are not involved in this conflict. We do support Ukraine's right to defend itself. But if you attack Western or NATO or U.S. forces, or if you resort to the use of chemical or biological or other weapons, then all bets are off. That we will not tolerate attacks on ourselves.
When you say all bets are off, I mean, because the Russians have indeed used the threat of nuclear power and chemical weapons, would the U.S. intervene more directly if Russia were to use chemical weapons in Ukraine?
I think we need to leave that ambiguous in terms of the matter of U.S. policy. But I think we need to say that any chemical, biological, or nuclear use is unacceptable, and that we will respond to any attacks on NATO countries or forces. And if he uses those weapons, we would not respond in kind, but there will be a response.
Okay, there will be a response, you say. In the meantime, the West continues to reject active measures like enforcing a no-fly zone. Ukraine's president is still pleading for help. What more can NATO and the West offer at this stage?
Well, I think we could offer to increase the shipments of air defense systems. We could get the Polish MiG-29s there. We could provide American A-10 aircraft as well, which are ground attack aircraft. We could provide surface-to-ship missiles. The Ukrainians need to defend their southern coastline. And I don't think we should take the no-fly zone off the table. The risks, of course, are very high because you are now talking about the possibility of NATO country aircraft flying over Ukrainian airspace, but being close to where Russians are operating. And potentially having to keep Russian aircraft out of the no-fly zone. So it's very risky to do that. And so far, the U.S. and NATO have decided not to. But I think that has to be on the table still as we see these horrific images of civilian casualties the Russians are causing.
Is diplomacy still on the table? I mean, the French, the German and the Israelis have been speaking to Russia. Do you think there's a diplomatic solution in sight?
Well, diplomacy has never been on the table. Russia has never been interested in seeking a ceasefire and withdrawing its forces from Ukraine, which is what they need to do for there to be a settlement. So Russia is going through the motions of sending Foreign Minister Lavrov somewhere or sending a delegation to Belarus somewhere, but they're not seriously interested in a negotiation. Likewise, as you heard from President Macron after the conversation with Putin, he's just not interested in any conditions that would be acceptable to anyone. So diplomacy has a chance after the Russians feel that their forces are losing and that they need to find a way out, but they are not at that stage yet.
Ambassador Volker, thank you very much for talking to us. Kurt Volker is the former U.S. ambassador to NATO, joining us there from Washington. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.